Hi, Shelly here. This week I decided to change out my paper that I have on top of my table. I think it would be fun to cover some composition books with my finished projects, so I make sure that they're a size that will work for that. And I wind up with 6 separate pages to work with. I'm super excited at this point because I don't really have a plan other than I'm just going to pull out my papers and start and see what happens. And to me, that is always exciting. As I got going, I decided to kind of go with an all blue theme on this first masterboard. And I'm using matte medium to stick everything down. For my second masterboard, I start out with a bunch of white papers on the bottom. Then I'm going to use some strips, a bunch of strips that I've got left over from my last art journal page, and do a green board. My third board starts out with varied colors, but then winds up leaning towards yellows and reds. Moving on to my fourth board, I decide to go all neutral and use my coffee dyed papers. On number 5, I do a base of white papers and then using tissue paper that I've either stamped or stenciled on. On my final board, I start off with some map pages. Then I layer this tissue paper that I had stenciled some magenta and orange flowers onto quite a while back. And then because of these flowers, I will continue to use these colors to finish off my page. Now I start thinking about what I can do next to my masterboards, and I start out with a stencil and some gray paint and just dauber on some flowers. Before moving the stencil each time, I'm smushing my stencil between paper towels off to my left and using my heat tool just really quick to make sure everything's dry before, so I'm not dragging more dark gray around my masterboard. Once done, I am not in love with the dark flowers as I thought I was going to be, so I try to figure, what am I going to do? Am I going to paint? How am I going to save this masterboard? So I decide, hey, I've got different colors of tissue paper, and I decide to put one over the top and see how that works. For my green board, I get out my fern stencil and a couple of different greens, and then I'm just going to go through and put some of these ferns on top. I really like how this turns out. But I really want to do that tissue paper again. So I grabbed some green tissue paper and put it over the top like I did with the blue. On my pink, orange, and yellow board, I decide to play with some gouache. And I just put some gouache colors out in this, ordered this 48 square empty container and put some colors of gouache in there. And then I just add a little bit of water and gouache and fill in the areas where I feel like I need it. This process took me quite a while, but I had a blast just relaxing and gouaching. And when I finish that one up, I move on and do the same thing with my red and yellow board. And once again, I decide to go over the top of my board with some tissue paper. This time I'm going to use a yellow piece. I started out good, but then I got a little too aggressive down here on the left, so I'm just filling in here and there with tissue paper from my edges. Once everything is dry, it's time to cut my boards down to the right size and start gluing them together. It's probably overkill, but I'm using some Aleene's white glue and some of my Beacon Fast Grab glue to adhere my books. I use a brush at first, but then down the road decide to just put the glue on there and go. And I do this for each of the books. I go through my cardstock and pick out some papers to use for the inside of my covers. Now I am far from being expert at covering anything or doing anything actually, but here is how I did it. I left about an inch around the edge, just eyeballed it, and then I'm going to square off my corners. The books do have rounded corners, and at one point I do decide to try rounding the corners with the old method of making the little triangles around, and that was okay. But I actually like the square corners better, and because the paper is so thick, it makes a nice corner. You can't even tell that there's a rounded corner underneath. So that's what I wind up doing, all but one, just like this. I decided to take a break from the glue and use my creative station to put a one-sided glue tape on the back of each of these to stick them down a little bit easier and quicker. And then I start applying them to the insides of my books. This blue one still is not my favorite with the the dark gray flowers. So I put out some painter's tape and just start playing around with paint. I pull out one of my wildflower stencils and put 3 of those on. I start adding a little bit more of the blue around here and there in those wider spaces, and I'm starting to finally fall in love with it. I add a little green to my palette and get a bottle cap, and I'm just putting a few marks here and there. And then I go in with some green in my background to add to the blue. I grab one of my little mandala stencils, and it's just like a flower, and then I'm just going to quickly put that on with some darker orange, and then I'm going to add in the lighter orange, the regular orange, and then I pull out my acrylic markers and just play around adding a little more detail. With my stencil back in place, I'm adding a little bit of the green to my non-stick mat, and then I'm going to apply that through the stencil just to give my wildflowers a little more something. Moving over to my magenta, yellow, and orange book, I really like the dragonfly tissue paper that I put on this one. So I decided to add a couple more of those dragonflies and make them kind of the focal point of the front of this cover. And then I found this sprinkler connector part in my tools and decided to add that around in a few spots. I have these pieces left, and I think what I'm going to do is at a later date go and make these into note cards. I think I don't do regular cards anymore very often, but I like to do note cards, and I think these will be really cute as that. And I'll probably just put some nice paper on the inside or a paint. I'm not sure how I'll finish them off, but and then these I thought I could finish off, finish off this side and make these even into bookmarks. I like my bookmarks a little bit longer. So yeah. Well, this was my first Masterboard try, and I really had a blast doing it. I hope you will get out your paper stashes and go through and try a Masterboard if you haven't done it already. Maybe I'm the one that's late to the game and you've all done it, but man, I just really had a lot of fun doing this. If you're looking for some more inspiration on what to do with your collage papers, you could check out my playlist that should be coming up on your screen right now. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you'll join me in my next video. Bye for now.